Welcome to No Options with Ty Gibson, the show where life's toughest trials become the foundation for your greatest triumphs. Real stories, raw conversations, and the unwavering belief that you were built to overcome. Now, here's your host, Ty Gibson.
Hey guys, I am excited today on the No Options to have, guys, as we talked about before on podcasts, I've always talked about, I meet some really neat people. And today we got Mark Ingrassia, and Mark invited me to be on his show. And man, I tell you, as I got to visit with Mark, I was like, man, he has got some great information. So Mark, I just want to say thank you for being on my show today.
Ty, thank you. It's such a pleasure. Thanks for returning the favor.
Yeah, no. And what we're always talking about, Mark, is just trying to, how we can help others, right? And we talk
Yes.
about that a lot. And you've got, guys, you're going to hear this. We're talking about students, schools, and then parents with these, with these students, right? So there's a lot of stuff that you got some great information on. So Mark, if you don't mind, let's just jump right in, man. Tell us a little bit about how, kind of where your expertise, because you've got some really good expertise here.
Yeah, sure. So this is specifically in the special education field. And so I got my start. I was a teacher in a school for the deaf and special needs for 30 years total. I was an assistant for 2 years and I was a teacher for 28 years. And that gave me such an amazing foundation for basically where I'm at now. And I've met some incredible kids who are now like adults, 40s with their families and stuff like that. This is really strange, but really cool stuff. And the parents, when I was working with the kids, you're always obviously working with the parents too. But until I left this school and started going into homes, you don't realize exactly what's happening in the homes, so you actually see the daily day-to-day activities and difficulties and challenges and triumphs that these families have. It's you want to make sure that you don't just spin this negatively, because there's a lot of wonderful things that come out of these experiences. And so seeing what was going on in the home made me realize that, really working from the top down was what I wanted to start doing now. I had worked with the kids for all those years and I love the kids and got so much reward from it. And I continue to, because they'll find me and they'll kind of reflect on the past and memories, and it's really wonderful stuff. But wanting to work with the parents, because I feel like they get lost in the sauce a lot of times, they're they have a child and nobody's prepared for the challenges that are ahead. Nobody's trained for this stuff. I mean, nobody's really trained to be a parent in the first place, so let alone now you've got, right? So now you've got a child who has extra needs, and you now have to, willow your way through this process. And it's not an easy process, and it doesn't come to you necessarily. You really have to go to it. And I think that's some of the biggest challenges that parents come across, is finding that internal fortitude to really go forward and do the things that you need to do, because it's exhausting. The daily of raising your child is exhausting. So now you got to battle a system that's not necessarily coming to you. They say they're there, excuse me, and they are, but they're not always going to be looking out for your best interest. And so that's where you really kind of have to take up the mantle and push and become that strong advocate for your child. And that's not an easy thing to do for everybody. Some parents are kind of born natural advocates. And then there's families that, just kind of like go through the system and accept what's given to them. And that is convenient for the system because it saves them money. And it also means that they don't have to, go through legal steps and deal with ongoing processes, so that, because they're overwhelmed too. I mean, the schools are overwhelmed, the parents are overwhelmed, the teachers are overwhelmed. There's just so much that's going into this. And I always imagine this perfect world scenario where everybody's working together, but I think that's really what we want to work towards, right? That's the key.
And Mark, you brought up a good point though, but you've seen it from, like you said, you kind of flipped it. You've seen the students, and you work with these amazing kids, and you've seen the like you said, the wins and the challenges too, right? We all had those. But
Sure.
you see that now. You kind of said, hey, after you got out of that, you're seeing that, hey, we've got it. That's just a part of the challenge, right? And I absolutely. I mean, I'm sitting here thinking, wow. I mean, as a parent, I have two daughters, and I thought, man, if there's no book for parenting. Parenting was tough with with kids, with any kids, and then trying to learn
Absolutely.
maybe some different when when kids have some different needs, it's even more challenging, right? And so I love your perspective because I feel like you've seen it here, but now we've got to go back over here and make sure that we're connecting the dots
Yes.
for that. So really, I mean, you've got a great perspective of where you're coming from. So, and I know you've done some amazing things with that. So, kind of, if you don't mind, keep telling us kind of what have you through your years of studying. What are you kind of doing to connect the dots there?
Yeah, sure. So for me, once I left the classroom, I kind of needed to figure out what I was going to do next. I was far from being retiring full time. I
Right.
have a pension, which is wonderful, but so that's given me some flexibility to be a little more creative with what I do. And through the pandemic, I had to take care of my ailing parents, so I kind of had to continue to fall back on what I knew, as opposed to being able to maybe branch out to something different, which was initially the goal. But fortunately, I love this work. So, it was kind of like a natural progression to find other ways to reach people. And that's where the podcast came from, because I wanted to be able to reach more people. And it was initially intended to be just as kind of strategies for families. But now it's grown into, interviewing people like yourself and bringing your stories to the world and to the families in order to be able to encourage and support them. And so just that vast variety of topic and subject matters from experts in the field and parents themselves and, people living with disabilities. So all that stuff has been like incredibly, just the education that I'm receiving and just the beauty of all of it has just been life changing to me. I can't believe I'm even sitting here talking to you now, because how else would I have known you? Right. So this was such a cool thing. And to have heard your story was so inspiring. And so, I think for parents, the idea is that you want to try to get out in front of the situation as best you can. And in order to do that, you kind of have to know what resources are available. And again, that's not given to you. I always would love the idea that you enter the system and there's options and there's like a path that they lead you on. You go to this organization, this office, blah 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 blah. They'll give you the information that you need. It's not always the case, and it's certainly not systematically the case. Those resources are there, but you have to kind of know where to find them. You'll find wonderful people that will lead you in that direction, which is fantastic. There's in that system, there are some incredibly beautiful, big-hearted people, and that's wonderful. I don't know how you could be in this business without that, honestly.
Right.
From my perspective, with my parent coaching that I do, in reflecting upon my experiences and seeing what's going on with families, I just noticed the whole idea of everything's in front of me in the moment, and I just have to keep reacting and reacting and reacting and responding and just be able to. I want to take responding out because I want to bring that back in a different way. Just reacting and reacting and reacting to the moment and being overwhelmed and not knowing what to do. So I adopted kind of a mindful parenting protocol where really it's more about how we are present in the moment that we are experiencing. So it's more about how we respond as opposed to how we react to something. It's easy to react. We get kicked in the knee, we say ow, right? So somebody cuts us off on the road, we might curse, we might do something, we don't we don't want to do. And if a child is doing something that we don't want them to do, we might yell, we might castigate, we might put them in a place where we're just filling their heads with negatives, right?
Mhm.
But a lot of that comes from the fact that we don't know ourselves so well. In that situation, we really want to be able to step back and take a look at why we're reacting a certain way, and maybe take that space when something happens and consider your response. Maybe 3, 5 seconds just to take, okay. And also meet your child where they are. Who is this person that I'm dealing with? It's not this thing that I created that has to follow what I believe life to be and has to live according to how I lived my life and what I understand, right? This is an independent individual, right? We're all individuals. So we all have the rights to our own feelings and our own responses to things. And so how we internalize what the world is giving us in a sensory way with a lot of these kids, in a sensory way, in a conceptual way, how we're conceptualizing the world, it may be incredibly and often is very different from the way a parent is conceptualizing the world. And so in that regard, stepping back and really trying to understand who my child is, who my son or daughter is, how they operate, what does that disability entail? Because different disabilities entail different things, right? So to be understanding and knowledgeable in those disabilities puts you in a really good position to be able to respond appropriately and give your child the space to feel and respond and react, because they will react, right? They're, in often cases, they're not necessarily going to take that space, but we want to teach that. That's another thing to do. So once we have it under control, teach our kids how to actually respond. And there's a lot of ways to do that through breath work and sensory input and things like that to be able to put them in a calmer place. So one of the things we want to remember is that when a child is, and I don't think I'm going too far off the rails, I'm kind of
No,
still
you're great.
sticking.
You're great. This is good
Okay.
information.
When we're dealing with a child who's having some difficulty, we really want to deal with the moment and not looking ahead. We want to deal with the moment. Where are they at? And in preparing for that, prepare is the key word, because we want to be able to educate our kids and prepare them for what's going to potentially happen next. And a lot of these kids need to know what's going to come next because that's a security blanket for them, right? It's very stressful when things are kind of just popped on them. Life is that way, so you also have to prepare for that. But to the best of your ability, routines, schedules, and preparing your child for what's going to come next makes life that much better and that much easier. But with that still comes challenges, because there's always whatever internal challenges are happening for the kids as they grow older. There's hormonal challenges, all these different times and moments in their lives where they're going to come across physical, mental, emotional changes, right? So keeping up with that is a bear. So, you
But
know,
Mark, and I don't want to
nope,
jump in, but
please.
I'm sitting here thinking, you're talking about, and you're an expert in this field about, like I said, kids with different needs and things. But really, this is life. I mean, if you think about it, I'm sitting here, you're talking about any kids.
Yeah,
I mean, it's how we all have our own personalities, and we all have to sometimes. I mean, you talked about sitting back and thinking about before you respond. I mean, those are all things as just all of us as parents, and
great.
really you think about it in a lot of ways, our day-to-day interactions with people before we respond, I mean,
Yes.
I think there's some great points here that you're making that's not, I mean, great, super good information on in your topic of expertise, but I think this information is really good for all of us, just in
I
general.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that's where the mindful thinking and the mindful
Yeah,
practice comes, right? Because
yeah,
it's for everyone. And and bringing it into this, because parents are just, they're exhausted in this area. Parents are, I mean, all parents have their jobs. Sometimes parents have more than one job. Sometimes they're single parents and they have to manage all of that, right? So whether your child is typically functioning or has some extra needs, there's always those challenges. There's a little bit probably more stress and strain and exhaustion in this area, because there's things that a typical parent doesn't have to consider that a parent of a child with extra needs has to consider. And so, and one of those things is behaviors. And when behaviors are an issue, it can set the entire family into turmoil, not just the child, not just the parents, but the brothers and sisters, all the siblings. It's a huge challenge to be able to find that balance for everyone, to be able to give my child who needs the extra help what they need, but also attend to my other children if you have other children and give them what they need. It's an incredibly, almost impossible job, I think, for a parent. And I think it's, and that's where I feel like the system is unfair, because that's where, if they could just uplift the parent and support the parent the way the parent deserves and needs to be supported, that would just give so much relief for them. So I always encourage parents to reach out to find other parents, right? Parent support groups are huge, because at least you have an opportunity to kind of unload. You have an opportunity to see that you're not alone, because I think this can feel like a very lonely world for a lot of parents, because you tend, because all the time that it takes to care for your child does consume it kind of keeps the outside world away and consumes you and can keep you in this smaller place. So for me, there's some that's a key to really knowing what your limits are and saying, I need to be able to find that balance, which is very challenging, but find that balance and be able to still access the outside world and be a part of the world, And by some of the better examples of parents and their children are the ones that really expose their child to the world, take them to parks, take them on vacations, take them out to experience life, right? It's the ones that tend to be a little more overprotective or afraid to go out because they're afraid there might be a meltdown or something that they might have to deal in front of people, and it can be embarrassing and it's legitimate. Those are the kids that tend to have a little bit more problems, I think. It's the kids I've seen, the worldly kids just seem to be able to kind of like, even if they have problems, there's I don't know, there's a connection in a different way to the world than kids that are a little more isolated. So I would definitely encourage parents to do that, to bring their kids out into the world and experience the world as much as possible. And to remember that they're an individual human being. They may have a disability, but we could all have a disability in a second, right?
Absolutely.
You've been on this side of it. I've had an anxiety disorder, which I had to overcome late in my career. I was probably like in my 26th year of teaching, and that happened to me. But what happened as a result in a positive was that it allowed me to connect with my students better who were dealing with this, and especially my autistic kids who were dealing with this high anxiety level on a daily basis. And I was like, wow, what insight I was able to gain. And the difference between the day before and the next day was when the child came in and I could see in their eyes, and I was like, do what you got to do, you
You
know?
know, and I think that's a great point, Mark. As you talk about, we all are dealing with something, you know. But I think you brought up a really good point. When you was diagnosed with the anxiety, high levels of anxiety, but you not only took it in, but you also took it, and then now you're turning that into helping others, and I love that. And I think we all could look in the mirror sometimes and go, man, the definition of your purpose is finding what you've been given to help others, and I think that's really your purpose, right? And so I always challenge people, man. We're sometimes these things we're dealing with. Look at it and find out how you can help people maybe going through what you're going through right now. And
Sounds
so I love that, and I think it's a great point of. And now again you've just been able to help these kids, and probably even more important, the parents
Mhm.
of these kids. Now, you mentioned another point I wanted to bring up about reaching out and getting into like support groups, and because I think it's so important to the point you brought up about not feeling alone.
Mhm.
Not feeling alone in this race. A lot of times we do, and I think that's life again, right? We just sometimes even in my situation, always was told, dust off. Nobody wants to hear your problems. That was kind of my dad's philosophy, right? And a wonderful parent, but back then, that's kind of that was how we were told, and that's what we did. But I carried that for so many years, and then about, I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago, right when I finally told my story, and I realized, you know what, I can simply tell my story and help others. So why wouldn't I do that? So my
Mhm.
point here is, I encourage what you're doing, and reaching out, tell your stories, because you never know who you're going to connect right or left. And as you talked about with your groups, getting involved, your parents getting involved with these groups and opening up your story being your experience with your children or your child. Those
Right.
opening up sometimes can help the person to your right, left, but also make you realize you're not alone in that fight.
Absolutely.
So yeah, no, I think those are great. I don't want to. I just thought those were some really good points. I wanted to make sure we bring to the
Yeah.
surface. So
No, I
continue.
agree. I agree. And that's what you do. That's what you do with your mission, right? And that's how I feel too. It's like, what are we here for? You
That's
know?
right.
So that's
Life is short, man. And
life.
and if we can learn from what we're going through and help others, and that's why I always say thank you for what you're doing. But now, what are some other things you brought up? There's a lot of information here, and you talked about a lot of support out there. What are some ways that these parents can, or do you have areas where they can go and get resources, and I know we're going to get all Mark's information at the end, guys, where you can reach out to
Yes.
Mark. But I mean, what are some of the outreach things for parents and things they can do there?
Yeah, certainly. You want to start with the school first. You want to kind of create as good a positive a partnership with your school and your district. So you want to work very closely with your teacher. And I think what happens is too is that a lot of families, they go through the school year, they have a parent teacher night, they have a CSE, which is like this meeting to create an individualized education plan for your child for the next year, which is basically a set of goals and accommodations for how your child's school year is going to progress and the things that they're going to be working on. So that's a big meeting that comes in the second half of the school year to prepare for the following fall. And a lot of parents go into that meeting and they don't necessarily know their rights. They don't necessarily know what to fight for. So, starting with the teacher in the classroom, I would say, I'm going to get back to the CSC for a second, or the IEP meeting. We'll hold on for a second, is to kind of ask for more frequent meetings throughout the school year to update what's going on with my child. Be assertive. Like, don't just tell me they're doing well, show me the data. Like, I want to see what's going on, right? There's truth in numbers, and I really feel like that is an area that parents need to demand more, right? And to hold the school accountable for what is on that child's IEP, because a lot of times those goals in the IEPs are not being met. And a lot of parents don't know it because they're too busy. You have parents from other countries that don't speak English that are easily walked over because they're not going to challenge the system anymore than the average person. And so things like that, and people that are afraid or they're uneducated for all the different reasons they may not challenge. But start with that partnership and try to develop that team. you know, the teacher, the school psychologist, your speech pathologist, every therapist, everybody try to develop a strong team with strong communication and request the data from these people, because that is something that I feel that when you have that, then you have something that you can actually, it's tangible. So when you're requesting services, you can show, well, this is the reason I need this service, right? Because some districts, not the schools, but the districts will deny services for whatever reason, and they'll fight you on it. And so then when that happens, you might have to seek legal advice, and then there's legal counsel. And so I would start with the school relationship, advocacy, finding advocates that are knowledgeable in the law and in the services that can either work with you prior to these meetings or actually attend the meetings with you. And there are advocacy services, and I can supply you with those too, and you can add them to your notes. I can send you some, but that, and then the lawyer would be like, if it didn't work out, then you might have to go the legal route. So actually, I did look up some places because I don't have them off the top of my head for you. This rights law, which is WRIGHTSLAW, is an educational legal information organization that provides resources about special education law and advocacy. So that's a place that you might want to contact, or at least look up, and they might have resources for you there. The Center for Parent Information and Resources they give you it's a technical assistance center that supports a network of parent centers serving families, children with disabilities. And then understood.org is a nonprofit organization that provides resources and community support for people who learn and think differently. So those are some places, and I can give you those. You can put those up.
Yeah. That's great.
Right.
Now,
But generally speaking, the advocacy is where I would start.
great. Now, what I know you offer a lot to help, and you have services, but I got to go back though. You mentioned a couple of things, like the getting in front of the teacher, meet your teacher's meetings, and I think that's what you mentioned some good questions, but what are some things that maybe from your as a teacher's perspective, what were some questions and things that other than numbers show, speak the truth? What are some things that, as a parent, you would request them kind of diving into a little deeper there, asking the
Yeah.
teacher?
Yes. So, management in the home is where I basically start when I'm working with families. And so management is like a lot of families, they just don't know what to do, right? So setting up, as I said earlier, a routine an everyday routine helps to organize a child's day, which then organizes your day. If it's a visual schedule, then the child sees it. And you say, well, this is the routine. It takes a lot of the burden off you because you don't necessarily have to keep saying what's going to happen next. Your child knows. And so there's kids that are a little more challenged with that kind of stuff, and you might need to reinforce with behavior modification, some reward systems and things like that. And we get into that when I work with the parents. And so that's something, behavior strategies is another thing that parents come and ask questions about and they want some help with. And that actually was not anything I got into the business to do, but it became an area that I became kind of very knowledgeable with and experienced with, because I was getting a lot of the really challenging kids who did kind of melt down and did, they would physically attack you, or they would have meltdowns in the room, and things could get messy. And so that became an area of real interest to me, because development of the human being is an area is what my passion is, right? I got into this, and the academics were like, okay, I have to do the academics,
Right, right.
and it was fine. But my whole thing was, helping this child become the best person they could be. That was my whole interest in developing the human being in front of me, right? Helping them to
Yeah.
guide them. And so I think that's what parents are struggling with. They want to know how best to reach their child. And so that's what they want to know. And I have this opportunity to be in a room, and I get to see them interact with each other. Where the parents at home, they might not, their child might go home and just kind of like isolate. They might not be as social. But here's an opportunity to tell the parents and show them what they can do. I used to direct plays at the school when I was there, and so I would get all the kids at the school up on the stage, and kids that couldn't read, kids that were shy, all these guys, all of a sudden they found themselves, right? And the parents came and they saw them, and they were like, "That's my child. I never saw he or she do anything like that." So that was a great opportunity to, exposing them to things in the world and getting them involved in things. Every child, I think, just that helps to round the child out, and helps them to understand that there's a world outside of themselves too. But in this regard, it got them to help them get in touch with themselves, and the
Yeah.
parents got to know them. So, routines, management, behaviors, these are questions that parents want to know. What do I see as the potential? And I've seen kids blossom. I've seen kids that the lights were out when they were 5, and then I remember this. I always think when I was telling the story, there's always one particular girl who was just kind of like just smiled all the time. She was like this little 3, 4 year, 5 year old. She just smiled all the time. She's married. She's out in the world. She's worked. I mean, the light went on, and she became so. You want to really be careful. I always tell parents, don't box your child in, and I tell teachers too, don't box that child in, because I saw a lot of teachers and people related in the fields. Just that's who your child was at 5 years old, at 6 years old. No, then you give them no options in life. That's it. They have no chance, right? Because you've completely defined them at that point, and they can evolve. And so I think parents want to hear. Anytime I tell them that, I think, wow, your kid's amazing, and they're like, thank you so much for saying that, because you don't hear it, and I have all these doubts and these questions, and they're scared. They're scared. They don't know what's ahead, and then they leave the school system, and then what's beyond, and what do you do? And that's a whole other conversation about planning, using the IEP to scaffold. So in informing parents that that's the process, and at like 14 years old, you want to start thinking ahead. Where are we going, right? What's our path beyond? And the federal government right now is not being very cooperative with the canceling of the Department of Education, and cuts to Medicaid and Medicare and all these kind of things, and SNAP. So a lot of these families are now, they're going to be even less supported once their child leaves the home. And that's another episode we can go
Right.
into.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I live here in Texas. Right here in this community, we've got an amazing organization that does, and it's called Big Brookwood in Georgetown. But they take and they do so much amazing things with these kids as they age, and it's a beautiful thing. And
I
I love it. But
love
on your story, you mentioned a couple of the wins, like you mentioned the young girl with the smile that now has a family.
Yeah.
What are some of the big? What could you share with some? I mean, I know you've seen some beautiful things happen. I know you've seen some challenging things happen.
Yeah.
But
Hmm.
what are some of the? Maybe share another win with us. I love
Another
hearing
win.
some another win through watch a development story that you've seen. What are some of the great things you've seen happen?
Yeah. Oh my goodness. I've seen kids physically overcome physical. We had this in the classroom. I had, I think, 4 kids at the time, give or take, and they were about 3, 4 years old. And mobility issues were big with every one of them. They all had some sort of braces that they were wearing. And so what I created was, with the help of the head of maintenance at our school, who was an amazing, he could build anything. And we built bridges in the classroom. So we had a 10-foot bridge with PVC piping and a 5-foot bridge. So they could hold onto the PVC piping and make their way across the room. And we could, like, have that little extra 5-foot piece so they could turn whatever. One day, one of the girls just was on it and just let go and just walked across the room. And she was the first time she ever walked on her own. It,
Oh, wow.
to this day, it's just, I get goosebumps just thinking about it. So, because her mother was just blown away, and then she went on to be able, I mean, she was very kind of involved autistically. She had amazing gifts. She loved music. She wasn't good at it, but she loved to play the piano. and, but man, when she did that, that was an incredible win. I had a boy, actually, that was in my classroom. When I went into the home, I had a boy who had a lot of, he bit everything. He would break everything with his teeth. And he was just, the first time I met him too, I had brought a pumpkin. It was Halloween. It was our first day together. And I asked him to go inside and get a bowl from his mother. And he came to the door and he just bit the handle right off the bowl. And I was like, okay, now let's see where we are. And over the course of time, that stopped. We just really worked on connecting with him and finding out the things that he loved to do. And he loved to do crafts and he loved to be involved. And his parents took him everywhere on vacation. And so the routines really built into him that he was obsessed with the schedules, but it was okay because you know what? He was attending to it and he was following it and he knew what was coming next. And he was able to ultimately start to control himself through the behavior strategies that we use and through the management that we did in the class, at the home. And the parents became more comfortable. The parents, their lives calmed down. And so now he's in his mid-20s, which I can't believe because I got him when he was 16. So that tells you where I'm at. And that's after my 30 years. So, but he's doing so well now. And I'm just so proud of him. And he goes out. I play music. So like they'll come see me sometimes and he'll sit there and enjoy the music. And so he's totally managing the world. He's out in the world and he's doing things. And so there's so many stories like that I have.
It's got to be so rewarding to see things like, we all have things that that as you see in life that are rewarding, maybe things that we're involved with, but I can't imagine much more rewarding to see one of those kids develop and like you said, be able to manage the world, right? And kind of just and develop and just, so that to me, I mean, I'm not even in that field, but I mean, I'm with you. I get goosebumps just listening to some of that. So that's awesome. So
Yeah.
well, I'll
So
tell you.
I just want to say, so my message to parents is don't sell your kids short. They don't get stuck in a moment when they're 10. There's more to come and things can change for the better.
But I mean, again, I keep going back to this, but that's all of us. We can't. Sometimes we get stuck. I mean, sometimes we've got to, ourselves. We got to be able to just kind of push through. So don't like you said, don't sell yourself short right here. In this moment because we're not able to get through it. Sometimes we got to be able to push through but I think again we all deal with a lot of the similar things. It's just in different ways.
I agree. I think it's a global message. And I think also that the disability community is a community to observe and to learn from, right? We want to include and we want to incorporate each other into this world and not look at people as different, right? So there's so much that we can learn from each other, including the disability world, where there's so much untapped potential that I feel like one day somebody's going to cure cancer as a result because they're so hyper focused on what they love to do that it's just such a benefit and it'll benefit all of us. So we need to be aware of that. And parents need to understand that too. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's I love that message. That's great. Now you've given us some good resources to go to. Now I will tell you guys, if you don't write this down, I'm going to ask Mark to share how to connect with him, right? Because his podcast is amazing, and I know he's doing some great things in this field. So if this is something that you are wanting to learn more about, get your pen ready. Mark, share with us on how we can connect with you on some of this information.
Wonderful. Yes, my website is specialedrising.com, and that has about a lot of resources. My podcast is on there as well. There's some blogs that I use. I haven't updated the blogs as much as blogs. There's a lot of parent information and ways to connect with me through that if you're interested in parent training services. My email is specialedrising@gmail.com. And then I'm at Special Ed Rising on Facebook and Instagram and TikTok, and I have a LinkedIn page as well.
There it is.
There it is.
Mark, I got to say thank you so much. And this is I know, like when I was telling them earlier, when I was on your show, man, just the knowledge that you have and the passion you have for this is amazing. And I want to say again, thank you for what you're doing, because it makes a difference. And I'm going to challenge everybody out there. We all have something that we can make a positive difference in. So make sure, you're kind of, I always say, go look in the mirror, right? Our minds can do amazing things. We just have got to believe in ourselves. So
That's right.
But Mark, thank you so much again. And I appreciate you being on. And guys, please reach out to Mark. He just gave us all of his information. If you're in that world and you in that space, Mark is a great help. So thanks again, guys. And Mark, thank you.
Ty, thank you so much. It's been an honor to be on your show, and keep doing what you're doing, because you're bringing amazing information and light to people too. So working together, man. Thank you. Appreciate the time.
Appreciate that.
Hey guys, thanks so much for listening to No Options. If this episode spoke to you, please take a moment and leave a review. And more importantly, please share it with someone who may need to hear it. You can find more stories, resources, and ways to connect over at my website, tygibson.com. And that is Gibson with a P, TYGIPSON.com. Remember, no matter where you are, your story isn't over yet if you live like you have no options. I'll see you next time.
Ty Gibson is an entrepreneur, a relentless survivor. Did you know he's also a powerhouse speaker? After overcoming 3 transplants of juvenile diabetes, he built thriving businesses with one mantra: no options. Ty transforms adversity into action. His keynotes ignite audiences with real-world resilience and 30-plus years of sales mastery. Are you ready to inspire your team? Book Ty Gibson today as your next speaker. You can call 512-944-4780 or head over to tygibson.com. That's Gibson with a P. It's time for your event to share the motivation that is no options.